Hello, students. I'm going to do a walkthrough of the Chapter 5, Time Value of Money, questions from homework and the quiz. So I've grabbed 11 questions that are pretty representative of what you may experience this week in your homework and quiz for Chapter 5. So what I'm going to do here is share my screen and go through some of those problems. So as I do this, I'll walk through kind of, how I do this so that you can follow along as we go. Okay. So this week, as we're looking at the concepts of time value of money, so we're moving out of chapter 3 and 4, which was heavily accounting based, and we're moving into the true authentic foundation of what finance is. Okay, so the concept of time value of money is the main component of that. It sets the foundation for everything we're going to be doing as we move forward. So we're going to look at some compounding interest. We're going to look at determining future value and present value. How do we identify what our rate needs to be, or the number of periods we have to put money away for. We're going to look at all of that. There's a couple of complex problems in here, but for the most part, what you should experience this week is in a reduction in chaos. I understand chapter 3 and 4 are quite challenging in terms of those cash flow statements and some of the other minutiae that we have to go through because those are the components that we're going to be working with as we move forward. So what I'm going to do is just jump in here. So what I've done, and the way I set these up is, this is the question just snipped out of homework, okay? You may have the same one, you may have something different. I'm not sure. Most of these are algorithm based, so typically what happens is that the numbers in here change. And they'll probably even change from the homework if you take it more than once. But what I highlight in green is what's listed there in the homework, okay? And the reason I do this is to help you all set up your formulas and set up your, your plan of attack for these questions. So that way, if you come across, say, in the exam in the coming weeks for chapters 5, 6, 7, 8, you come across one that says compound interest, well, you can go back to your Excel file and you can look at this. I do strongly encourage students to use Microsoft Excel. It is the most practical tool that we have at our disposal. So a lot of the business world runs on Excel for better or worse, but it is a giant calculator is all it is. But it helps us streamline our formulas a little bit. And I'll show you that right now. So we're looking at, to what amount will the following investments accumulate? So we're looking at, what if we invested $4,800 today for 8 years at 11%, and it's compounded annually. Now, we'll go into some a little bit later that are compounded semi-annually or even quarterly or monthly. So, but for the starters, I typically lay out all of my future value, present value calculations in this fashion. Rate, number of periods. So number of periods is our years or our months or quarters, whatever we're looking at. Payment, which we don't have any on this one. We have our present value and we have our future value. So if I jump in here and I put in rate, I will note that, let me get this out of the way. This was originally set up to number. Okay, so remember when we're dealing with percentages, we need to think of where the decimal goes. Okay, so once I punch that up there, it's 8%. If you ever need to move it to the left or the right, to go 2 decimal places, like sometimes the homework asks, you do so up here. So actually, I apologize. Our percent's 11. Our number of periods is 8. There's no indication that there's a payment, and our present value is $4,800. Now, we need to think of this in terms of cash flow. We are experiencing a cash outlay of $4,800. So that's going to be negative in this sense. Down the line, we'll see some future values of annuities that are paid out at the end. So we'll deal with future values being negative. But for this instance, we lay this all out. Now, what's interesting about Excel is once we build this formula, all we have to do is then input the next data set and be good to go there. So to do future value, we do equals FV, and we see it right there, future value, returns the future value of investment periods, based on constant returns. And then it tells us what we have to do first: rate, number of periods, payment, which is 0, we still have to put that in there, and then our present value. Right now, we don't have to deal with type, but we will have one in a little bit that we do. And then you hit enter. So the future value of $4,800 invested today for 8 years at 11%, compounded annually, is $11,061.78. That's as easy as this one is. So then we change it up and we say, all right, the next one for B is 8% for 7 years. And the initial investment was $7,800. And the formula automatically adapts to what we're doing. So for this question, you can easily go through once this is established, and you can answer A, B, C, and D in a matter of moments. Okay. So that's when we're looking at compounded interest annually. We've also, this chapter, been introduced to annuities, so a consistent payout over a particular period of time. But this is the same thing that we're looking at in terms of future value and compounded interest. It's just phrased differently as an annuity. And so this first one, we've got 9% for 10 years. And on an annuity, though, we did not have an initial present value investment. It's a payout of $500 every year. And then what we have to do is just, again, do the future value, the rate, number of periods, our payment, and our present value, hit enter, and that's our answer. So for the first one, for $500 at 9% for 10 years, we see that the future value of this investment is $7,596. Again, we can quickly compute the next one at 8% for 8 years and $96 payments. We see that that one is the accumulated cash flows or streams of payments a little over $1,000 here. Okay, so again, very straightforward so far in terms of future value. And so let's move on to the next one. Get the whole question in here, sorry. So we're going to compound value here, okay? What is going to be interesting on this one is we're looking at sold his Porsche, placed $8,000 in a savings account that compounds annually at 6%. Now, part A says calculate the amount of money that will be accrued if he leaves the money in the bank for 3, 6, and 16 years. So I went ahead and built this with 6%, 3 years to start, and no payment, but the initial, we sold the Porsche and we put 8,000 in there. So again, we have a future value calculation. Okay. And then we get future value of $9,500. Now, what's again nice about this, for part A, it just says, what's the difference between 6 years? Okay, well, we got 3 years. Now we have 6. Now we have 16. So again, very simple to do that. Now it says for part B, if he moves his money into an account that pays 8% interest, or one that pays 10% interest, rework part A using these new interest rates. Okay, well, this is going to be a little more, this is going to be a longer question because we have to do it 3 times for each one of those. So again, we go 0.08, 3. Okay, so again, we see it go up to 10,000, 6, 12,000, 16, 27,000. And then you go and you just replicate it for the 10%. So you have to do it several different times and then draw some conclusions with that. Just a second. Okay. All right, so this one is going to get a little bit different when we look at compound interest with non-annual periods. Again, we're going to be doing a future value calculation, so I have these pieces plugged in. But what I'll do is I'll walk you through what this means for, how do we set this up in a particular way to take care of these adjustments. So for the first one, we look at, we're going to have a $7,000 outlay, and we're going to give to the bank for 8 years and an APR of 5%. Okay, great. Just like normal, we have our future value. Now, what they're going to say is at 5%, this is annual. So how do we go about figuring out if it's semi-annual? Well, this is very simple in the calculation that we do. We actually will take 5% and divide it by 2. Okay, so we're going to have 2 adjustments over the year. And then the number of periods goes from 8. So where we divide the rate, we actually multiply the number of periods. Okay, so you'll see what I did here. Equals this times 2. It's still the same $1,000. And we see just a nominal increase in our future value, because what we're doing is about half the year, we're getting an extra 2.5% or so of investment on the principal that's reinvested at 6 months instead of at a year. Okay. Now, bi-monthly, I take the original amount and divide by 6. And so what I do on the back side there, the same thing. I take the original number of periods and multiply by 6. And this gives us our bi-monthly rate. Now we see again an adjustment here. And on this one, I did introduce type. Okay, so let me show you what type is real quick, because it's important on this one, because we're talking about when do we reinvest our interest income. Okay, so again, when I see here, end of period or beginning of period, what we can assume on any of these questions is it's end of period unless specifically specified that it's beginning of period. Okay, so please hear me on that. This is very important when we start to get down the line of cost of capital and looking at bonds. We need to make sure that we're reading carefully for whether it's end of period or beginning of period. For this one, it's just end of period. So we click 0 and then hit enter, and it's done. Now, what's interesting for this formula, if I had just deleted all of that, and since I'd already had the future value here, and I want to click in here and show you the pieces that are attached to it. So these are the formulas here. Okay. What's unique about Excel is if I drag this over here, it's going to drag all of these bars each way. So I don't have to retype this if I don't want to, because again, I deleted everything out of here. See? And so what we'll do, drag it across, and it does the work for us. We don't have to retype it. Sometimes this can get a little messy if we have multiple pieces moving, but not this week. We should be fine on that one. Okay. So what about if we need to find the rate? So if we're solving for R, so we need to find our rate. So I reworked this a little bit, and instead of future value being at the bottom, I just went ahead and moved rate to the bottom, because that's what we're solving for. So if we lend a friend $6,000 and our friend is going to repay $8,000 at the end of 5 years, what rate are we charging our friend? So again, we've got our number of periods. We're not getting any payments because we're not getting our $8,000 back until the end of 5 years. So, and our initial investment's negative. Our cash flow situation is $6,000 out, and we get $8,000 back in the end. So what's cool about Excel, instead of having to do this algebraically or on a calculator, we just go through, and again, it tells us, all right, first number of periods, comma, payments, comma, present value, comma, future value, and we don't have to worry about the other two right now. We'll get into those later. So our rate of interest for our friend is 5.92% for this investment, for borrowing this money. The next one, finding an annual payment. So again, we have something different here. We normally have rate, number of periods, payment, present value, future value. Well, in this one, we're going to look at Lisa, who wants to have $1 million in 45 years by making equal annual end of year deposits. So notice that this one, they specify end of year, which if you don't click 0, it automatically does end of year, but I'll show you that in a second. Tax deferred account, paying 8.75% annually. What must Lisa's annual deposit be? Okay, so we have our rate, our number of periods, We want $1 million in the future, and our present value is 0, because what we're going to be doing is making end of year deposits to drive us up to that $1 million at the end of 45 years. This is essentially a 401k question if you want to. So again, rate, number of periods, present value, future value. And then if you want type, we already know it's going to be 0 because it said end of year right here. Okay. So again, when we think about this in terms of cash flow, yes, this number is going to be negative because it's going to be a cash outlay at the end of every year. But essentially what we're suggesting here is after 45 years at that particular interest rate, if it were locked in and guaranteed, we can put away basically $2,054 annually, and that would equate to $1 million at the end of 45 years. All right, this one's going to be a little more robust, I believe. Okay, so we got a complex annuity. So upon graduating 30 years ago, Nick was already thinking of retirement, and since then he has made deposits into his retirement fund monthly of $110. So we've identified our monthly payment of $110. And again, it's a cash outlay. He just completed his last payment. It's ready to retire. His retirement fund earns 8.4 interest compounded monthly. So how much has Nick accumulated in his retirement account? Now, this is an indicator. If we just put in 0.084, it really would mess up. I mean, we'd have a huge number. I don't even know how far this is going to go. Yeah, way too much. So something's wrong here. So what we have to do is pay attention to the problem. So it says 8.4% interest compounded monthly. So again, very similar to what we did in the problem above right here, where we took the annual rate, divided it by either 2 or 6, but this one says monthly. So we divide the interest rate by 12%. If we do that, then we must also multiply the original 30 years also by 12 months, okay? So that increases our number of periods to 360. We have our payment, our present value is 0, because all he's been doing is putting in $110 on a monthly basis. And over 30 years, it grew to this, okay? So this is just the future value formula that I've used before, equals FV, and then rate, number of periods, payment, and present value. So the next part, it says, in addition to this, Nick, 10 years ago, received a $25,000 check from his uncle. He decided to deposit the entire amount into his retirement fund. What is the current balance of the portfolio? So again, we reintroduced the 8.4. So I just made it equal to this instead of typing it again, because even though it was just 10 years ago, he's going to get the same percentage on that on a monthly basis. So again, the rate is 8.4 divided by 12, which was up here. That's what I linked to. And then 10 years times 12 months. And so I just did the future value calculation of that. And then you add them up together to get the current balance in Nick's fund. Okay. These ones can be a little tricky if you forget, like say you multiply this or you divide this. Make sure that you're just kind of paying attention to the sorting of what you need to do. So pay attention, read all the questions, because again, if you get 8.4 here, he has like $5 billion in future value, which isn't going to happen, especially at 8.4%. Okay. So this one is a more challenging question. Okay, so I'm going to go through, and I've highlighted some colors. I'll go through those in just a minute. All right, so we have 3 different questions here. We have investment A right here, investment B, and investment C. Okay. This is assuming a 15% discount rate, find the present value of each. So what we have to do is discount back our cash flows over time to figure out our present value. So again, earlier when we started, we were looking at future value, but now we're looking at the present value. So if we put away 16,000 a year, I'm going to make this 11, sorry. And so what we'll see here, if we put it away for 5 years, we know that that's going to be an outlay. Here's our interest rate for 5 years that I counted here. And then we just do the present value calculation, okay? Future value is going to be 0 because we'll pull that money out potentially. But what we see here is our present value of this one is $36,000 over the 5 years at 15%, okay? So if these are our end of year investment plans, basically we walk away here at $55,000. So we are investing $36,873 to walk away with $55,000. Okay, and we lose a little bit in terms of the discount rate, but we looked at that in the first couple of weeks in terms of nominal rates of return when we're dealing with risk-free rates and inflation rates. Just part of the game, and that's what we'll get into that more as we look at cost of capital and required rates of return and things like that. Now, B is a little trickier because it wants you to think that you just need to worry about the $11,000 for the final 6 years, right? There's nothing invested here, but we're going to run this out for 10 full years. And to do so, we have to do a little bit of backwards work, okay? So we still have the same rate of interest. If you notice this, 15% for all of them. It didn't change. The number of periods has changed, but we'll look at that, okay? And so to start with, we want to see, well, what's the present value of these investments of $11,000 over those 6 years? Well, we see that it's $41,629.31. Okay, so great. We have that. Now, what about measuring the other 4 years? Because we can't get to this point without the other 4. Okay, now nothing was invested. So we're going to lose a little bit more of our discount for those 4 periods. But what's unique about this one is we're going to take the present value here and use it as our future value. Okay, so I did equals minus this number because remember the future value, we're going to pull it out. So it's going to be a negative in that sense. And that's just the way this works on the backside. I believe it was page 172, maybe 192, where this is at in the textbook. Okay. Bear with me. Let me just see which one it was on. Yeah, it's on page 172 of the e-text. Okay, so on this one, we have 2 parts. We have to calculate for the first 6 years. We have to deal with the other 4 by making the solution for present value our future value here. Okay. So again, we're discounting it even further for 4 years, and we say our present value of all our investments over the next 10 years is $23,000 to get us to that $66,000 based on the information we have. Okay, so that's why I highlighted these yellow, these ones blue, and they align with what we're covering here, okay? So on this one, it's a different shade of blue. Probably should have made it a little different, but we just need to look at the first year for part C, okay? And it's $11,000 at 1 year. Present value is, if we're gonna need to have 11,000 for this one, we need to invest today $9,565 for 1 year at 15%. What we have to do with the next one is we're going to assume this over 6 years here, okay? Which is part of this, okay? And we have to use this one as the future value, okay? We're going to do all 6 years, but we're going to come back and we're going to pull that money out, okay? And so what we have, same rate, again, 15%, but we have 6 periods here. We've already accounted for the 11, but we have this plan of action with this 55 for 6 years. And that's why I added this little color over here. There is more detail in the question than what I provided, but we would use that 55,000 as, again, it needs to be a negative, as you can see here, of our future value to dictate and determine the present value of each investment. Okay. So we're kicking in 55,000 there, figuring out the present value at 6%. Okay. So we have this present value for this one of a payment. We're gonna make that payment. And then for the final one, we have 10 years basically, but we're going to have a future value of $11,000. We didn't really invest anything very much in terms of that one, because the present value at basically day 0 is going to be $2,719 for 10 years at 15% to get us to the 11. What you have to do for, excuse me, for this one is sum up all 3 of these. Okay, so this plus this plus this. Please remember these need to be negative here in terms of your future value. Okay, and your payment obviously needs to be, but that one's a little more challenging. You know, so take your time with that one. I think there's one like that in the homework. I don't think it's on the quiz, but it might be. But if you build it out the right way, you know, if we go through here and let's say this was 16,000, we want to do it the same. Well, we're gonna make everything 16K except the 55. We'll leave everything else. Say this was 85K. Okay, so but we built everything out because I made this equal that cell. But let's say we were looking at 12%. 5 years and negative 16,000. Okay, so again, if you build it out the right way and you just take your time with it, it will adapt to whatever we need it to be. Again, you just have to take the time, make sure everything's aligned the way you need it to. So if you build it out the way I built it and you just adjust your parts and understand what needs to be done, make sure everything's in order. Again, like I said, if we just somehow adjusted from 15% to 12% and from 11,000 to 16,000, we would be easy to make these adjustments. So again, and then if you sum them all, they're doing all the work for you behind the scenes. Okay, so again, that one takes a little bit more time, but that's okay. Again, it's on page 190 or 172 in the textbook. It does take some beating around to get done, but you can figure it out. So somehow basketball player Dennis Rodman, I assume that's who it is, has made a $5,000 debt balance, or has a $5,000 debt balance on their Visa card. Okay, 11.75 or 11.7% interest. Current minimum monthly payment is 5% of his balance, which is $250. How many months, round up, will it take Dennis to pay off his credit card if he pays the minimum of $250 a month? And so this, again, as I mentioned, time value money has so many parallels to what we do as whether we're young adults or middle-aged or older. A lot of our financial security comes from understanding these particular components. If you have credit card debt, how long will it take you to pay it off? Sure, it says it on your credit card statement, but there are times where it may be better for you to understand whether it's APR or EAR, so that you fully understand the totality of what the interest is doing to your account. Because 11.7% APR on this Visa card, I think right now they're running like 25%, is a pretty heavy burden to bear in terms of interest payments. So, but again, we see 11.7. What I did, remember, it mentions monthly here. Okay, monthly payments. Okay, So I divided the 11% APR over 12 months, which is pretty typical. Sometimes we'll get down the line and we might see 365 days, but for now it says compounds monthly instead of daily. The payment's $250, which they identified. The present value is $5,000 and our future value is $0. Now, this is different because our cash did not go out the door. This is more like a loan amortization. So this present value is not negative in this sense, okay? So what we want to do is we can figure out the number of periods by using the NPER formula. So take our rate, we take our payment, we take our present value, and we take our future value. And we see that it takes 22 months for old Rodman to pay off the old credit card. So again, that's how to use NPR. So we've covered how to find rate, how to find present value, future value, and number of periods. Now, what we're going to look at is looking at how to find the payment. Decided to do a lump sum amount, lump sum. Oh, I'll leave that one in here. All right, so you would like to have 44,000 in 12 years. Okay, so that's our future value. All right, our present value is $0. You plan to deposit, and I know that because I've read this question, but you plan to deposit each year an equal sum in the bank, which will earn 7%, and your first payment will be made at the end of the year. So 12 years, present value is $0, because we're not doing anything right now, but at the end of the year. And so what we have to figure out is, well, what's the payment we need to make to get us there? So PMT is our payment. And again, rate, number of periods, present value, future value, enter. So we need to pay at the end of each year, basically $2,500 over 12 years with a sustained interest rate of 7% to accumulate $44,000 of future value. Okay. I'm sure there's some tax consequences to this, but anyway, nevertheless, that's not what we're looking at here, but it was something we might consider down the line when we think of cost of capital or debt financing. So if you decide to make a larger lump sum deposit today, instead of annual deposits, how large of should this lump sum be? Assume you can earn 7% interest. So again, we're going to keep the same framework, 7%, 12, no payments. We just want to do a lump sum today. Okay, so we're flipping this basically. We don't want to do any more payments on the annualized basis. We don't know what do we have to put away today to figure out to get to $44,000 over 12 years at 7%. We need to put away $19,536. Okay. I am leaving part C. It might be a little bit of work. It might be a challenge, but I'm not doing that part for you. I want you to look at it and think about what you can do with it. Okay. And this is the last one. So we're going to look at perpetuities. Perpetuities basically is the most simple formula that we have this week. It's basically taking the value of the perpetuity and dividing it by the interest, the percentage. So what we're trying to figure out is our present value of our $750 perpetuity. Again, it's different than an annuity. A perpetuity goes on forever. An annuity has an end date, but perpetuity keeps on going. All this formula is legitimately the price divided by the percentage. So you do the first one. Okay, great. We did 750 at 11%. Now we do 2020 at 15%. Now we know it's 13,333.33. Make sure you round accordingly to whatever it tells you to do. But you can punch all four of these in real quick. But this is part A, and then what I just put in was B. So not too bad in terms of what we're trying to achieve for chapter 5. So I'll follow up with chapter 6. But yeah, this isn't too bad, but please, I encourage you to strongly take the time to work through and fully understand time value of money so that you have the foundation you need for us to move forward in the coming weeks into characteristic and pricing of bonds, characteristic and pricing of stocks. We're going to get into cost of capital. All of that is built off of the concept of time value of money. When we get down the line and we start to look at capital budgeting decisions, we need to understand, well, if we invest in project A and the initial outlay is this and the expected returns are this, what is our net present value, for instance? So there's a lot that goes into this, not only for the class, not only for business, but a lot of this applies directly towards you as an individual, either a consumer, investor, saver, just day-to-day person. A lot of the skills that are taught in this particular chapter are extremely important to individual financial security. While at times it can be challenging to understand if we put X number of dollars away today, delaying that consumption does have a rate of return with it if we can do so. So try to understand how this applies again in class, in work, in your personal life. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. If you do reach out, please send me your Excel file so I can see where you're at. That is the easiest way for me to figure out where you're kind of hung up. So if I get your Excel file and know what question you're looking at, that will help me to quickly respond to you in terms of getting you some information right back. So again, I appreciate your patience. I'm glad chapters 3 and 4 are over. I'm sure you are as well. But we'll kind of go from there. And again, I will have, we'll look at chapter 6 coming up and looking at risk and return. Okay, thank you.